Mr. Chair. Very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm only going to make a brief contribution in this Part 2 debate. And the reason that I rise to take a call on this is because it does deal with some retrospective legislation, which is something that I'm never particularly comfortable with when we do that in the House. And we've done a couple of other bills that have retrospective effects during this urgency session. And I want to remind members of the Legislation Design and Advisory Committee's advice to the House and to lawmakers with regard to retrospective laws. And they state legislation should not affect existing rights and should not criminalise or punish conduct that was not punishable at the time it was committed. The presumption against retrospectivity, the general rule is that legislation should have prospective, not retrospective effect. And when you consider what's happening with this particular validation, this retrospective legislation here, in fact, I don't think that's in any way in conflict with what the Legislation Design and Advisory Committee are arguing. If anything, one could argue that not passing this legislation would be the violation, because people have in good faith participated in the process, made their submissions, had their hearings, and potentially if this validation doesn't take place, they could find that that whole process was invalid and had to start again. So I would almost go so far as to say that to be consistent with the overall principle that underpins what the Legislation Design and Advisory Committee are arguing here, we probably do need to pass this to avoid any confusion and to ensure that all those who have already had their say and had their submissions heard are still considered and that they didn't waste their time. So while generally speaking I'm relatively uncomfortable with retrospective validating laws and retrospective provisions in laws, in this case I suspect there's probably good justification. I think, however, it is incumbent upon government to answer the questions that have been put, particularly the question by the Honourable David Parker, which was around the particular date of the 28th of February and whether in fact validating that date results in any exclusions of people's submissions where otherwise they might have been able to argue the case that they should have been included. And I haven't heard a response from the government on that, which is somewhat disappointing. So overall, like I said, I've looked quite carefully at these retrospective provisions. While generally I wouldn't support them, I think in this case there's probably a reasonable justification for doing so.
I call the whistle.
Yeah,